We are in beautiful Bellingham, Washington for our first ever head-to-head review, which this time features 5 of the best lightweight E-MTBs. And each day this week, we're gonna be dropping a different video featuring one of these bikes. But up first is the Santa Cruz Heckler SL GX Axis build. The Heckler SL GX Axis lists for $9,699, making it the least expensive model on test. The size large test bike in the low setting has a 64-degree head tube angle, 478mm reach, and a 1263mm wheelbase. Lastly, it weighed in at 43 pounds, 11 ounces, or 19.8 kilograms, the second heaviest bike we had on test. How'd you guys get along with the geometry on the Heckler?
I really enjoyed the way the Heckler felt. It pedaled fine on the climbs, and it felt like a playful bike going down that was confidence inspiring in some pretty rough terrain.
Yeah.
So I felt like I could ride it on the edge of my limit, but as well, it was going to be fun to ride on some more casual trails, smaller blue flow trails, stuff like that.
I feel like it felt like a big bike when I wanted it to feel like a big bike, but it felt like small and playful when I wanted to pop off of a little feature. It somehow had that chameleon, no pun intended in Santa Cruz, effect, where it felt good in a lot of places.
Yeah, it's a nice balance of inspiring confidence without feeling like a big bike.
Yeah.
I really like the RockShox suspension on there. It feels real plush without. It's real hard to bottom it out. It feels kind of bottomless.
Yeah. Was it? One of you was saying the first time you got on it, you were thinking it was not nearly enough air in the fork.
Yeah, my first reaction was the pressure was too low because it felt pretty soft. But then, normally when you're slow pressure, you hit the bottom real quick, and I just never found it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's easy to say we all really like the Heckler. The one downside for me was that I'm not a huge fan of the super low bottom brackets, and I did tend to have a few pedal strikes was my only nick against it. But like you guys said, there's mostly things to love about the bike. It does everything pretty well. Sure, and not just pedal strikes climbing, but actually descending and just smashing your, Yeah, yep, exactly. But that was in the low setting, so if you feel like me and don't love super low bottom brackets, you can set it the other way and probably wouldn't be an issue. But with that low BB, I felt like the Heckler just cornered that much better than the other ones.
Yeah, I noticed that in the climbs too. When you are on the windy single track trail going up, it's noticeably easier to get around the tight corners on the climbs with the mixed wheels.
Yeah. Interesting that trade-off, because you talked about liking the low bottom bracket on the cornering, but also then the pedal strikes.
Yeah,
it's a pain with that low bottom bracket too. It's always, as we've been talking about this, everything's a compromise.
Everything's a trade-off.
Yeah. So overall, like the bikes in the sense. Let's talk about how it climbed, which of course, most of our climbing was done just on fire roads, getting up the climb as quick as we can, which I think is really how most people be riding these bikes. So let's talk about the drive unit. This, as well as a lot of bikes, had the Fazua Ride 60 motor. That has 60 Newton meters of torque, max watt output of 450, and then 3 ride modes plus a boost mode. So it has Breeze, which has 122 watts max, River, which has 250 watts, and Rocket, which has 350 watts. And that boost mode has 450 watts for up to 10 seconds. This bike has a 430 watt hour battery. What do you guys think about the Fazua setup on this bike?
I'm a big fan of the Fazua system. Feels plenty powerful enough. The balance between rider power output and the system's power output feels nicely balanced, so the bike behaves naturally. I gotta say, the only thing I'm not really a fan of is the control unit on the handlebars.
Yeah.
You can kind of bottom out the switch and you're still not totally sure that it received the signal.
Yeah, a lot of you guys didn't like that. Bottom it out, I've heard sometimes they can get stuck in a certain position too. And
yeah, the switch fills up with sand and grime, and then it no longer really works. So you have to take it apart and blow it out. Yeah, I also really enjoy the Fazua system. I've spent a lot of time on it. I think, for the test we were riding in the middle motor mode, which is plenty of assistance, climbing pretty steep logging road grade.
Yeah, let's talk range now. This bike actually had the furthest range of every bike we tested. So it went 14.8 miles or 23.8 kilometers, climbed 4,800 feet or 1,460 meters. That was in the mid mode, which Fazua calls River. I think you finished up the climb. You said that it bumped down into eco mode for that last 5%, trying to
Yeah,
the last bit of battery.
Yeah, the display has 5 dots, and so that's your, how much battery I have left. And so at some point in the last dot, which indicates 0 to 20% left, probably 10%-ish, I would say, it drops down to a lower power mode than the middle mode, which I was in. But it kept giving me power up until it couldn't.
Cool.
Another thing I would say about the motor that I really like is the noise it makes. It has a very quiet motor that has kind of a pleasing noise. I think I started by riding with friends that had this bike, and I would hear that noise, and it's not obnoxious or anything. Yeah, and now I associate it with assistance on the climb, which makes me happy.
No, I was going to say the same thing, in that I was used to riding full power Shimano and Bosch motors, and the Fazua was noticeably quieter, which is really nice, because I found it a little annoying on the full power bikes, but that was early on in my e-bike experience, so maybe you kind of get a little more tone deaf to it after a while.
Yeah, the other day I was doing laps on a trail around here, and a hiker was going down the logging road, and I passed him 3 different times, and you could tell each time that he was really trying to figure out if I was on an e-bike or not. Which I think is a win.
That is another cool thing about these smaller, lightweight motors, is that it's really kind of hard to tell, even for an experienced cyclist, if they don't get a good glimpse of it going by, like, was that or not? And your average person that's not into bikes, they're not going to be able to tell.
The Heckler SL is a perfect example of a bike that you really can't tell without looking really closely that it's an e-bike.
Yeah, it's a beautiful bike.
Yeah.
Well, let's just wrap up with who you guys would recommend the Heckler SL for.
We're a little bit skewed here in Bellingham because we're kind of close to BC and our riding is a bit similar. So I think our trails are a little rowdier than the US national average, at least. So I think for an average BC PNW rider, the Heckler is a great bike. It's enough bike to get you down most everything, but it doesn't feel like such a big bike that you
can still have fun on a blue flow trail on it.
Exactly, it doesn't feel like you're overkilling it. So it feels like this great middle ground.
Yeah. Scott made a really good point. You want an e-bike for this type of riding. When you're going up a steep fire road and you're coming back down like a gnarly trail, you don't necessarily want to take an e-bike to your local cross-country loop. Like, you could pack in more laps, but that's not what you're getting an e-bike for. And so I think the Heckler SL really speaks to that, of a very well-rounded bike that you'd want to take on a variety of fun, steep descents,
Yeah, no, I think I agree. It's the PNW Relay is the bike I want for pushing myself on the absolute, edge of my comfort level, but it is less fun, on the normal trails that I'm riding every day. And I think the Santa Cruz was the perfect fit for 95% of my riding.
Well, we've got 4 more of these videos coming up this week, as well as a final roundtable, so make sure you stay tuned for those. And if it's weeks after we post this anyway, you can go watch them right now. Otherwise, don't forget that bikes are for everyone. Have fun out there.
The color is amazing.
Barney Purple is hard to compete with in my mind.
It's the best looking, but I think it probably turned the most heads. If you want to talk to people in the parking lot at your favorite riding spot, that's probably the one to get.